California just constantly wants to instill laws to hinder people's freedom to exercise the Second Amendment. And so in terms of the school systems and public school systems, I would not trust my children to be trained with a gun. I think that's something for the parents, and that's something that should be instilled by the parents from the young age, like we've discussed, because children need to understand that the right to protect themselves is a freedom and is within our amendment right. And when you are constantly seeing, for example, even in the media, where guns should be feared for, it kind of creates a controversial statement for our simple fundamental amendment rights.
I mean, they should be feared for. They can take a fucking life. I mean, forgive me for sounding wrong here, but I don't like that. It doesn't sound like a good idea to me to make you a sort of kid not fear a fucking gun.
Gun violence is destroying black communities.
I think I'm going to not comment on that, on the basis that I don't think I'm in the right sort of context or place to answer that question. Because I'm not black to begin with, and I do not suffer from any sort of like heavy gun community, as I mentioned before. So I don't think I have a proper basis to make an informed argument on that situation. I'll leave the subject topic for now, but if anything comes up, then yeah.
Will the agreeers please step forward?
God. It's been 50 minutes, and this is gonna be a fucking long video. Although to be honest, there were a lot of pauses in between, so it might be a little bit.
All the gun-related deaths in America, black children are suffering the most from gun-related deaths.
Yes.
Since 2006, it has been increasing that black children are the victims of gun-related deaths in America. And out of 14% of black people in America, black people make up 80.
Black Americans accounted for 29% of gun deaths in 2022, according to CDC data.
3% of gun-related deaths in America.
And why do you think that's true?
I know it's true because I've seen it growing up in different neighborhoods, whether it be in Southern California or whether it be in New York. I've seen it by police-related deaths in America, and even being perceived with a water gun. Black children are murdered. For example, in the 1960s, we've seen the Black Panther Party in America, who started to legally, by the way, have a right to carry and protect their communities. But it wasn't until a black resistance group that Ronald Reagan at the time, who was the governor of California, enacted the Mulford Act, which...
The Mulford Act was a 1967 California bill that prohibited public carrying of loaded firearms without a permit. The bill was crafted with the goal of disarming members of the Black Panther Party who were conducting armed patrols of Oakland neighborhoods.
Then restricted most of Californians from having guns. But the whole time, we had white Americans carrying in California. We had white Americans carrying everywhere else. But it wasn't until a black resistance group, I want you guys to understand that. It wasn't until a black resistance group, Black Panther parties, came out and started to protect their communities that America said, oh, we have to have more strict gun laws. All right, and this continues to repeat, right? So I think we're continuing to see the same pattern of, some states and some governments have more strict gun laws when it comes to black Americans than white Americans, for sure.
When it comes down to specifically like inner city gun violence and things like that, there's a long history of obviously racism, redlining, and things that lead up to it. So it's a longer discussion, but frankly, what people need to understand is the contextual understanding of when you grow up in an area where everyone has guns, your mindset and what they all talk about, and they are right, is to equal the playing field. I should have a gun. That's going to make me feel a little bit safer. And frankly, I get that. It's like having mutual destruction with nukes. Countries do that. But we also try and de-escalate by getting rid of our nukes and reducing our stockpile, because we know ultimately it isn't.
I like this guy. He's making a lot of points that I try to make but never usually can.
safe that everyone has these things. And so, but that's why, and I think everyone on this side believes that like if we can push towards, like they have in many different countries and it has worked, if you push towards reducing those guns, then those people see less need to have those guns. A lot of people saying, like they're gonna say is, oh, well, you know, the bad guys are gonna get their hands on guns. Every year, 300,000 guns are stolen from.
An ATF report found that 1,000. Oh no, sorry, that's 1 million. An ATF report found that 1,223,538. No, I can't numbers apparently. 1,023,538 fire. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so okay. My I'm trying. There's no 100 in the second. Yeah, so brains not mathing right. My apologies. That number firearms were stolen from private citizens from 2027 to 2021. Only 16 states and Washington D.C. require individual owners to report stolen firearms to law enforcement. Federal law requires gun dealers to report stolen inventory.
From law-abiding citizens who don't know how to properly lock up their guns. And the problem with a debate like this is we're speaking to people who are very good gun owners, very educated. You know, you're talking to basically the street racing drivers and saying like, hey, I can go 110 on the freeway, trust me, if you just know how to, I get it. You probably could and you might not get in an accident, but that's not everyone.
I definitely agree. I think that the issue of gun violence is not just about guns. I think it's a systemic issue, and I think Black communities in particular have been intentionally divested and oppressed by our government, and I think that guns fill the gaps where resources are not, and just taking away guns isn't going to like change the, you know, there's so many other roots to this issue that need to be addressed. Over policing also, like Black communities are over policed more than any other community, and gun violence also happens at the hands of police who are supposed to be protecting. And then of course, yeah, it makes sense that you would want to have a gun to feel like you can protect yourself against this, but this is all a product of a broken system that has been broken for many years.
So what I'm hearing is there's a belief that Black communities have a high presence of firearms for various reasons.
Yeah, it's called Animes, ANAMIES, which basically the ideation that like your morals shift based on the environment you're in. So I did a study specifically on Egypt and how they had their uprising and how people were starting to sell drugs on the street, and why did they do that? Well, that was the only way to feed their children. And so people don't wake up and go like, I want to be a drug dealer. It's like, hey, back in the time where you couldn't even get a job based on your skin color, what you had to do to survive was a lot different than everyone else. And so when you get into things that are illegal, because that is literally all you can do, you then have to basically have a gun. You know, you have to change the way that you view the world because that's the world that you're given. So you're like, hey, I'm in selling drug business, and to compete, I need a gun to be safe. I'm gonna get robbed. And it creates this environment. Now, when we shift forward where everything's quote unquote equal, it's like, why are you guys still having guns? Well, that's what we grew up around. That's what we knew. That's what we know. And it's a long systemic issue that is very hard to fix. But America in general is affected by it, but obviously Black communities are affected the most by it.
All right, I'm gonna bring in our disagreeers.
Whew, where to start? So I think if you want to talk about systemic racism, and I do, I have a background in criminal justice reform, gun control is one of the most systemic racist laws on the books, dating back to slavery, where we prohibited slaves from having guns because obviously an armed population could rise up. After slavery ended, you had the black codes continuing to try to block Black people from being able to access guns because they weren't full citizens. Then you had the 14th Amendment come in, so now everything should be clear. But no, states started putting in facially neutral laws in the 1870s, where basically they still had things on the books to block Black people from getting guns. That's a history that has followed us. I love that you brought up the Black Panthers. This should be a wake-up call. Yes, when the Black community has started to organize after things like the Atlanta Massacre and the Tulsa race riots, what happened? They started arming themselves. They started rising up. You had the Deacons of Defense that were out here guarding Martin Luther King Jr., and they came in and squashed them. Shortly after 1964, you get the Civil Rights Act. 1968, they come in and pass the Gun Control Act, which creates a system that has a background check and all of this. But most importantly, it starts stating things that people can be stripped of their gun rights for. And what's chief among it? Having a felony. Who's most likely to be arrested? Black people are 6 times more likely to have a record than white people. This is the scam. It has always been about eliminating black people's rights to access their Second Amendment. It's super racist. And today, we see that continuing to play out in the black community. So, but to say that like gun control or guns are the problem, no, like in fact, what we're doing is we're making them more likely to be targeted by police. This is where you get stop and frisk. It's about...
I don't want to say this and sound racist because I'm not. I want to preface this, I'm not. I do not hold anything against black people of any kind. I think everyone is equal as everyone else. But I don't think... I mean... Surely felonies isn't like just a hidden way to like stop black people from getting guns. Because I mean that sounds like a reasonable idea to put on like a restriction document. Like I mean, right? I mean, I'm sounding unsure because I don't want to sound like an asshole, and that. But in my head right now, I'm thinking, well, it's not just black people to get felonies, right? Am I wrong? Or am I overthinking shit? I don't know. It's just right now in my head. My current thought right now in my head is, well, I don't think that's like a hidden way just to get black people to stop getting guns, because white people also get felonies as well, and it's not going to have any type of felon with a gun. If someone could tell me if I'm wrong there, then please let me know, because I feel I got off. I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I don't like it.
Gun control, they only get something off them like 3% of times, but it gives them the excuse to come in and shake them down. You have, I think, 20% higher likelihood that black people to this day are convicted, sentenced, and given sentencing enhancements. That's from the Sentencing Commission, if they are black. So this is something that has continued to be targeted against the black community. And what I can't understand from your side is, why would you come in and say, give that same government more power?
But are you saying there's an issue where black people don't have access to guns?
Yeah,
Like
or
they
like
need more
legally.
guns. Like black people need more
No, I
guns.
think
But
legally,
I feel like I'm hearing two contradictory things, because I'm hearing black communities have a gun issue because they have too many firearms.
And you're saying they
black
don't have
communities
enough.
have a gang issue. They have a violence issue. They have a poverty issue. These are things that lead to criminality. But when you come to black people being able to legally access the right to carry a gun and not being shaken down by the government for it, and not being incarcerated for it and permanently stripped of their right to vote after they've been caught with a gun, yes, this has been a complete disenfranchisement of the Second Amendment towards the black community. And we can talk about the violence issues happening, because I think they're government related too. But that's not the guns that are creating the violence
So you
issues
think
in
if
these
the
communities.
if that area had more guns, there'd be less violence?
I think if you had more gang intervention, I think if you had ceasefires,
No, but I'm
I think if
asking
you had
in general,
call-ins.
would more guns help?
No, I don't think so,
Would
because
less-
you
would
have
less-
violence
would
issues.
less guns
I don't.
help?
I've seen no indication of that, because you have a violence issue.
It's funny
you
to me.
have a poverty
It's
issue.
funny to me.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
We agree.
I think
I think we agree on that.
Yeah.
And that, like you're talking about the
can be
over policing, the being racist about who gets the gun. That
Right.
we
It's
agree
Violence
on.
comes up because of different issues, right? Like sometimes I think mental health gets vastly overblamed for these things. Occasionally, yes, but more often it is because of the fact that people don't have opportunities. They get involved with gangs. They're looking for places to go. Violence is very limited to people under age 25. Once their brain is fully developed and once they get the resources they need to get on a better pathway out of these communities, you see violence.
No, we fully
exist.
agree.
The thing funny to me is y'all talk all this violence, but I'm in the streets with these people. The same people that you talk about come up to me. I make YouTube videos. I get banned all the time. I teach proper stuff, how to fly with a gun, how to do this with a gun. I get banned. You can't even find my stuff. And you know what? People come up to me and say, hey, Rambo, man, I really appreciate you, man. Without you, I wouldn't know how to do this. I wouldn't know how to do this. Hey, Rambo, I make bullets. You know how many calls I got from people? Look, I got goosebumps. Calls I got from people say, your bullets saved my life.
But are you saying violence isn't an issue in those communities?
What is an issue with every community? It's gangs, man.
I
But
think
you're-
that
but you're
violence
saying-
is like
but you're
it's
of the
higher
mindset of
in
more guns would
those
help.
black
Well,
communities.
I
and
can't say
inner
more
cities.
guns will help. I think more control with like gangs and stuff. It's not like regular people just running around, just shooting them up, killing
But
people.
where do the gangs get their guns?
Right.
Guess what? From anywhere. You don't think they can't get them from overseas? You telling me?
No, not
You telling me?
overseas.
You telling me a boat of guns never came from overseas?
Well, no, it relates to
my
the
God.
government.
You telling me they
and
never ship guns from overseas? I know the people that used to do it, man. What you talking about?
We do know that in about 40% of homicides, they
According to a Bureau of Justice Statistics 2016 survey of prison inmates, 6.4% of state and federal prisoners who used a gun in their crime stolen. Oh my God, I cannot speak today. 6.4% of state and federal prisoners who used a gun in their crime stole it, and 43.2% obtained it off the street or from an underground market.
They were obtained illegally. So where they got it, how they got it illegally. This is one other thing I wanted to address when you guys were saying about guns getting stolen off cars. I had a gun stolen in my car. I'm very good with my gun. I would never take it off my person if it were in my control. I had to take it out because I was at the Capitol in Tennessee lobbying. I wasn't allowed to take it into the governor's office, even though he could carry in there. But I had to put it in my car, put it in my glove box. It was a last minute thing, and I was like, okay, I guess I have to leave this in my car.
Did you lock your
Locked
glove
my
box
car.
and
Yeah, I did everything I could. Broke in, stole it. This is how people, and it's
can't
really,
lie.
I mean,
Do you
I got
think in that
guns
case?
stolen, too.
Do you think in that case, if you weren't allowed to carry a gun in your car on you, that it wouldn't have gotten stolen?
had the government not disarmed me and made me go put my gun in my car, it wouldn't have been stolen. Everybody would have
why
been
have a
safe.
gun? How come you can't have a taser, or how come you can't have
What's a
pepper spray?
taser gonna do to a 250
When my
pound
life's
man?
on
It
the
doesn't
line,
matter how much he weighs.
listen,
You
it
can
does
just
matter.
tase them,
When
and
my-
pepper spray out,
Have
and
you
then
not
run
seen
away.
videos of people getting tased and continue to come at you? Like, that does
But
not.
I think there's an extreme of like, you're going to protect yourself. If someone walks behind you and shoots you, what did the gun do? Did it help you?
It didn't.
I want to kind of get some clarity because I still feel like I'm hearing like a contradictory thing. Who is in favor of there being more guns in black communities? And why is that?
So according to the Department of Justice and also the Pew Research Center, as the number of guns have increased in this country, as the gun rate ownership has increased, so has the homicide rate.
States with high rates of firearm ownership. Try it again, shall we? States with high firearm. Oh my God, I can't speak. States with high rates of firearm ownership consistently have higher firearm homicide rates, according to Johns Hopkins University.
Has decreased, and it's decreased not just for homicides but also for suicides. So statistically, we actually know that as there are more guns, you actually have less violence.
Suicides just reached the highest peak this year.
Nope, not the highest peak. The
Yes, it
highest
is.
peak since about 1980
as well.
something, but not the highest peak.
But we have the highest level of guns we have today.
49,449 people in the US died by suicide in 2022, the highest number ever recorded.
And we have the highest level of suicides today.
No.
Or one of the highest levels. It's,
Right.
it's gone up.
So people have a mental health issue because they want to kill themselves and they just happen to have a
No,
gun.
but she's saying
Or
that it
We'll
goes
dig
they
down.
just
into
don't have
mental
use
health.
or medicines.
We'll
laying
dig
around.
into mental health in a minute.
Let me ask you a question. If you live somewhere you couldn't eat, you couldn't feed nobody, you got guns all the way around your house, everything, you wouldn't get a gun to protect yourself.
that's what we
and they
said,
breaking in doors.
No.
But criminals all over though.
To be honest, for me,
that's like stopping
that- I
terrorism.
would
So you're
think-
saying you would get rid of like murder being illegal because clearly people
Right.
still murder, right?
You can't stop it
But why do we have murder being illegal if it still happens? What's
because
the
you
point?
want to catch people.
Because we
Like,
can at least
come on,
prosecute
man.
them and put them in jail.
So we're there. So you get it. So we know that like by having these laws, it will still reduce it. We've seen
Yeah,
it in
it's
other
definitely
countries.
going to
There shouldn't
reduce
be
it.
laws
There
that
we
apply
go.
to people like
So,
us.
so that's where we need to
More
agree on, which
laws
is
won't make a more reduction.
Wait,
we will.
I don't
did you
think
say the law shouldn't apply to people like
No,
you?
I'm saying you guys are talking about banning guns. All of a sudden we went straight to like we are anti-gun and we are pro-gun to like let's ban guns. Why are you so eager to take away the freedom of people who use weapons properly for the sake of people who are
'cause
going to
it's
go
a-
and use
it's-
them
it's a
improperly? and
control
This is the equivalent
tactic.
of me saying right now there's 300,000 cases of drunk driving a year, and of those, a small fraction get in a car accident. Why take away my right to drink and drive just because
No,
you
no,
can't
let's take
hold
away
your
your
liquor?
car because your car cannot drive itself,
No, no,
just
no.
like a gun cannot fire itself. So
Sure.
if you take
That's
away my ability to own and fire a gun,
Her analogy's right.
because your
she's
weapon is
talking
the
about-
car.
Yeah.
Your
Your
weapon
weapon
is
is
you
the car.
abusing
The car
the car.
is a weapon.
Yeah, you're talking about
It's
you.
you.
We're not talking about you.
You're responsibly using the car.
Anyone on this side in favor of restricting law-abiding citizens' access
I
to
believe
guns?
that nobody in this life should have a gun. So,
Okay.
but I'm not the one to say that you shouldn't. You know, I'm all about nonviolence. I don't believe in harming or putting more suffering against any sentient
Well, I
being
think
in
the
this life,
fundamental,
so I don't believe anybody
the fundamental
should have a gun.
aspect of the Second Amendment is not to harm people. It's the right to bear arms and defend yourself.
against a
let's not
terrain government.
misconstrude
Oh,
the
we'll get
context
to
of
that.
it.
Right.
Let's go back to the prompt. Remember, we're talking, just in this section, we're talking about gun violence destroying black communities, whether or not you agree with that.
I feel like I can speak to it because I just graduated high school and I'm a black student. I went to school at a primarily black and Hispanic school. So there's like a bit of, I don't want to say gang presence, but that kind of like vibe, I guess. I was worried sometimes that people were going to bring guns to school, and it had been threatened a couple of times. We had to skip school. I think, you know, if they didn't have access to these guns, first of all, the gangs wouldn't have as much power, and you know, I wouldn't have missed out on quality learning time because these people threatened to bring a gun into school. And look, I can't say that it happens any more or less at like a primarily white school, but I'm just speaking from my experience. Guns were an issue, and there was going to be there's a possibility of like real violence happening, you know?
Can I point something to that too? I think if we focused on gun-free zones, we could kind of question why it is that you had to leave the premise too, right? So these gang members would come to your campus and would hinder your education. So what would happen if the administration or staff was loaded and ready to protect children instead of allowing mass shootings in children to...
Well, as you said, if they didn't have the guns to begin with, none of that would be necessary.
to occur? What would happen?
Okay, so I actually really hate that argument. Like, we should have the teachers and administration.
All the arguments that are being made by that side, I'm liking it. I'm loving this. I really am. They're literally giving this the exact same shit I've been saying this entire fucking time. It is a stupid argument. You get rid of them. I don't need them in the first place. Fuck. Oh god. How long have we got? Oh, for fuck's sake, we only have half an hour in. For God's sake. Oh god. I am trying to keep an open mind here, but so I am sorry if I'm being very judgmental. It is my aim is to try and be as open-minded as possible. I'm hearing a lot of things that are resonating with what I believe, and it's boosting my confidence. I'm sorry. I apologize. I am trying to see both sides of it. It's very. Oh dear. Okay. Anyway.
Should have guns. More guns is not going to help anything, because at the end of the day, like, let's just say you shoot the school shooter, right? Then that's still a dead person, right? And their life isn't worth anything more or less to me than my friend's life, because a life is a life, right?
And I'm not advocating for people to be killed, right? However, when you're in a school situation and you're dealing with a person's life, it's seconds.
Have you ever
away
been in
from-
that situation?
Well, I have, and it's been a scary situation.
I was a teacher for 5 years, a public school teacher, and I was a teacher when they were trying to arm teachers. There are so many issues that teachers deal with on a day-to-day basis. Having a loaded gun in my classroom with 19 special education preschoolers is not on the top of my list. That would not make me feel more comfortable. That would not make me feel like my students are more comfortable.
Well, definitely
But
not
statistically,
that.
it would make you more safe.
No, it
Because,
wouldn't.
I mean,
No,
can
it
we talk
wouldn't.
about gun-free
Kids can-
zones, or is there a prompt on this, or can I go? Because we looked at the data around this, and over 90% of
A study by Everytown for a study by Everytown for gun safety found that between 2009 and 2016, 10% of mass shootings took place in gun-free zones. The study found that a majority of mass shootings, 45%, 54%, took place in private residences and were related to domestic or family violence.
mass shootings occur in gun-free zones.
If you get rid of every gun, right? You get rid of every gun. Look at the countries that already did it. What happens?
Australia had.
Okay, and what happens? What happens?
They
What
had-
happens?
they had
I
a-
lived in Japan.
So
they
they-
start stabbing people.
Okay.
Right or wrong? Am I right?
I mean, fine, but that's not the only country in the world. There's also, like, the UK, which I've mentioned before. Pretty sure Germany has the same sort of laws. Pretty sure most of Europe does as well. There's not gonna be I'm not. I mean, I know. I've never like. Doesn't mean there's going to be no crime. But I mean, surely. I mean, it's still bad knife crime, but surely knife crime has to be better than a gun crime. Surely, because a knife you have to at least get to the person to be able to get them first. A gun, you can be still at least a few feet away and fucking shoot them. Again, a knife, you can only kill people once at a time, but at a certain speed. You have a fucking mass shooting with an assault rifle, mow a whole crowd down at once. I mean, that seems so self-explanatory to me. That thought and that theory alone.
It also has
The
the
stabbing
highest
goes
rates
up,
of
right?
suicide.
A stab
in
is a
the
lot
country.
easier
Hold on.
to
A stab is a lot
recover from.
easier?
To recover from
Are
than
you
a
sure?
gunshot.
We've kind of moved to a lot of different areas, but I do want just a show of hands. Who is in favor of action to remove illegally obtained firearms from communities?
Nobody wants illegal guns in the community.
I mean, I have some. What does that require when it comes to the policing and the interactions that they're going to have with the people in those communities? This is the same thing to me as saying, like, should we go in and remove all illegal drugs? Like, no, product bans don't work. It doesn't work if you ban drugs. It doesn't work if you ban abortion. It doesn't work if you ban immigration. It doesn't work if you ban drugs.
They're still gonna
People
come
are
in.
going
Does
to
it
obtain
reduce
it.
it?
And just
They're
because
still
somebody
gonna-
has an illegally
So you
obtained gun
don't-
does not mean they are a violent person.
And I just want to get your opinion clearly on this. Do you think there's a correlation between the presence of illegally obtained firearms and the rates of violence in certain communities?
Absolutely. But I also think
But you
when you
don't
look
think
at public
something should be
policy
done to-
approaches, you have to make sure that the secondary side effects of those approaches are not worse. And when you're talking about sending in police to clamp down on communities
But we
that
didn't say
happen to
that.
have
No one-
higher
no one
rates,
said
well,
that.
that is what you're saying, though.
No one said that.
That requires policing to come in and
police should have
confiscate.
firearms.
But then what's one proposed?
Again, right there, they don't. They shouldn't. Because going back to that same point again, if civilians do not have guns, then the police do not need to have guns themselves to be able to protect themselves from that said gun holding suspect.
Solution?
I mean, community-informed programs. I mean, we see it in Massachusetts. They have community safety programs where individuals go out who are not armed, and they go around neighborhoods of domestic abuse cases, mental health episodes when somebody's having a mental breakdown. They
listen
don't
to
call
what you're
police.
saying,
No, he's right though. Call-ins, Operation Ceasefire, like these things
That's
work.
all good.
These
but-
are-
Without firearms, though. That's what I'm proposing.
But listen to what
Without
y'all saying. Where is
firearms.
that working at? Are y'all going in the middle of Chicago,
No, but I think
in New Orleans, doing that type
Well,
of
some
stuff?
of these
exactly-
programs
No.
are.
she's exactly
Some
right,
of these
which
programs
is-
are. They're going into places like Oakland. They're working and like this is interesting because I've worked around a lot of criminal justice reform. So I've worked with very left-wing people on this, and most of them are not anti-gun because they recognize that there are so many secondary consequences to that, and they recognize that the gun is not the problem. The underlying causes of violence are. And so yeah, they do these community-based programs that are completely like free of government for the most part, which is like based. Love that. And they come in and they have people who were formerly caught up in gang life. They have people who've been victims of violence even. They do these interactions where they go to the hospital when there's been a gang shooting and try to intervene and prevent there from being retaliation. And yeah, they work. They do see a statistical difference in violence, a meaningful difference, and it's without having to involve the police or the government or come in and take away people's guns. So
Okay, we gotta
I think
reset.
those things are great ideas.
Middle ground.
Mass shootings are both a mental health and gun control issue. Will the
Yes, because I know you can say that, like, I know that a lot of people say, oh, it's not a gun issue, it's a mental health issue. Those they just can't handle guns properly. Just they don't need. Fair enough. But that's you trying to tackle two problems at once. And while I agree that yes, that there's other the gun issues are not the only problem way that someone could either do harm to others or themselves. It is one of the more guns are still one of the more lethal ways that harm can be made. So,
The agreeers, please step forward.
okay.
I believe that they are a mental health issue, above all else. But when I hear you say gun control, I don't mean governmentally. I mean exactly what we talked about earlier, which is parents being more aware, parents not recognizing that there is a mental health issue, that there is a medication issue, that there is an emotional issue, distress in the home, and taking measures to protect their child. Most of the time, apparently, these children somehow have access to guns. And I think that if they were disturbed enough. We've heard stories in the 90s and 80s about kids bringing knives to school. Well, that's before they had access to guns. If they are distressed and emotional.
Yeah, but they could, at least that knife still is a knife is still going to give you a lower body count. Yes, people might still die, but it's going to give you a lower it's going to give you a lower body count even still.
Enough, and they're wanting to hurt others or themselves, they will find a weapon. But unfortunately, we're living in a society where parents aren't taking as much responsibility for their weapons as they should.
I think that the absolute bottom line is that a mentally healthy person does not commit a mass shooting.
Correct.
And that's just
I would 100% agree.
I think.
True.
If you are
yes.
happy with yourself, you are happy and healthy in your mind, you are not going to shoot up Target or shoot up your school.
Okay, so
Yes.
there was a couple of things that you said that kind of questioned me a little bit. You know, mental illness is completely promoted as propaganda in the media, right? So when you look at the rate for mental
I had to say that face you made. I had to say, wait, what?
health issues in comparison to the amount of mass shootings related to that, it has nothing to do with a mental illness. It has to do more so with mental disorders, because these people, they're not relying on medication to consciously know what they're doing. They know what they're doing, they're just lacking empathy. So I think...
Wait, what's the difference
And that's like a
between
mental issue, right?
What's the difference between mental
call it a
illness and mental
disorder or
disorder?
whatever.
Well, a mental disorder is definitely something that has to do with your sense of removing empathy, consciously knowing you're aware of your situation, similar to a sociopath. It's a mental health issue in the sense that there's a disorder, and obviously depression and bipolar disorder is definitely along those lines. I mean, there's so many environments that kind of instill you to become that. A lot of times you're born that way. You look at the way it's just being perpetrated in the media, and it's instilling fear among a wide variety of people. You know, you see this glorified scheme that's being constantly spread over, which makes people fearful of their lives, which makes people maybe not want to own a gun. I just keep caution with reading the news, because there's a huge video on, for example, Candace Owens talking about the situation where the government does perpetuate a sense of fear and control onto humans in order to hinder their ability to be free and exercise freedom. So when it comes to mental health issues and the correlation with mass shootings, it doesn't add up.
So I'm a mental health therapist. What you're trying to say mostly is it's creating this fear, because obviously mental illness is not just growing exponentially, we're just identifying things more. And I think what you're trying to say simply is it's trying to almost create fear. Oh, you have a mental illness, I should be afraid of you. You're gonna, right. And it's no, I mean, this is what I don't like about it, which is that everyone has mental struggles.
Mm-hmm. Correct, so let's just ban everyone from owning a gun.
Yeah, well, and that
I mean, not the worst there in the world. Okay, right. So slight change of plan. This video is taking a lot longer than I anticipated, so I'm gonna have to eat my dinner whilst I watch this. So I'm gonna mute myself. But sorry if you have a thing about that sort of stuff. But yeah, I don't want to leave it too late. So yeah, sorry. So let's just do that.
I mean,
when it comes down to fixing
there's a slippery slope there. So it's.
I think he's talking more about providing resources.
Yeah,
and
providing
addressing-
resources, and I think the other way to understand it too is, and I think what she said, which I kind of disagree in that sense, which is hey, a normal person wouldn't do that. Yes and no. I mean, maybe not mass shootings, but suicides and things like that. Well, we have what we call Z codes, and Z codes in the DSM-5 are basically events in people's lives that may trigger short-term versions of these things. So when I diagnose someone, I take into account. So if you came to me and said I'm really depressed, and I'm oh, why? Oh, my dad just died. I'm gonna go, okay, that's normal. Obviously, you're a struggle, but in that time, you could still shoot yourself, be suicidal.
But in that time, you're also not mentally healthy.
Yeah, but at the same time, no one's mentally healthy at all times. So and then I think someone said this earlier, which was hey, it's on the parents if they don't catch the kid. It's no, because that's telling every parent, hey, if your kid committed suicide, it's your fault. You're an idiot. You're stupid. No. People go through ups and downs heavily.
Right.
Maybe it's just not natural to want to kill other people. I don't know. I feel like that's if you do want to, then there's something maybe wrong in your brain.
It's not that everyone with a mental health issue would shoot up a school. It's that anyone that would go and shoot up a school clearly has a mental issue.
Right.
But what's going on here that we feel is is causing.
We don't,
Like
have,
the
we don't have
US.
Jesus.
Right.
I need the world to come
Yes,
back to
I
God.
agree. I
We need everyone to
agree.
give their
So
life
that,
to
and that
Christ.
tends to happen is like pro-gun people tend to be more religious and tend to view it that way through that lens. Like I'm atheist, like
Well, let's disassociate religion from just loving Christ, right? Because those are two different things. Religion definitely has its own nuance that I don't even want to get into, but just loving God, I think, is what.
But I
she's
think
trying to say.
the most religious states are the ones with the highest shootings. So
Actually, the ones with the most gun control laws.
no, that's
have
not.
the
That's
highest
actually
rates.
not true. The top 5 are actually the ones with the least homicides and guns and deaths and guns. The top 5.
According to Pew Research Center polling, the most religious states are all in the South. Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Louisiana. Tennessee had the 11th highest per capita firearm mortality rate in 2022. Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana had the three of the top 4 mortality rates. What? I think there's been a bit of a misspell there. Tennessee had the 11th highest per capita firearm mortality rate in 2022. Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana had the top 4 mortality rates.
5 in terms of lax guns are actually Oklahoma, Kansas, Mississippi, Alabama. They have the highest rate of shooting.
Right.
Justice and Sarah
Yes, I
wanted
also
get
want to
in.
bring up, whether it be the Buffalo mass shooting that we've seen the white supremacists go in and shoot about almost 10 plus black people, or the other shooting where Kyle Rittenhouse shot a bunch of people during the 2020
In
uprisings.
self-defense. In self-defense. He didn't
We
go
see
shoot
these
random people.
instances of white individuals shooting black people in America. There's never been an instance where I have seen anybody on TV, psychologists say this person was having a mental health episode. There's never been and I could keep going down in the last 5 years of several mass shootings where black and brown people have been killed by white supremacists. And there's never been an instance where they say, this person's having a mental health episode, let's give this guy a break. So I kind of step back from saying that mental health is a main issue around gun violence, because when it comes to white supremacists, when it comes to people saying they want Jews to die and they shoot Jews, which has happened, there's never been it's never been an instance of, oh, this guy has a mental health episode.
In my opinion, though, like being racist is sort of a mental health disorder. But I know it's
Yeah.
not like a diagnosed thing. It's just like.
But in
my
America,
beliefs.
they don't say that. That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. They say, oh, he had a troubled past and his parents didn't treat him right, so he shot 10 black and brown people in the school.
We have to come at it like multifaceted, and it's so hard to actually attack this, because we could be like, hey, let's worry about mass shootings. Okay, but what about, what? And each one can be attacked in a completely different way. And that's why I tend to go like, look, me and him differ. I'm not ban all guns. I'm like, let's restrict them until there's a happy medium where we reduce these suicides, reduce mass shootings, but also people like you guys can own them.
Let's hear from Sarah.
Yeah. I just want to say I agree with what you're saying in that, oftentimes mental health is blamed. People pick and choose which communities we use it as a factor or not. I also think that oftentimes when we look at mass shootings that have happened, there are signs that point to this person needed support, specifically in schools, right? A lot of times you might see kids who are making certain drawings or have made certain comments, and a lot of times these kids maybe weren't getting the counseling services they needed at school, or sometimes they are, maybe diagnosed with a disability and maybe they're not, and there's issues that go into that as well. But I think that there are signs that show that somebody needed support or was being bullied, but our culture tells us, there's video games, there's all of these stories about like, well, get your guns, the internet becomes this like place of solace for students who are looking for support and looking for a community that they're not getting at school. And when our culture is telling us, well, guns will be the solution, then yeah, they're finding that
It's
solace,
not
they're
the
finding that
culture,
community.
it's Hollywood, and it's the government. Again,
I think it's a combination.
because there is a huge documentary actually where Michael Bay, the director, along with one of the department chairs of the government, well, they would share how the government would have to filter and revise scripts in order to create the perpetuation of missiles and the sort of combat scenes that were, because they had to keep control. They're advocating for this to be constantly perpetuated, and I can't emphasize it enough, it's really scary because a lot of people, they kind of keep this narrow mind of, oh, it's actually us, we're the problem, we're actually not the problem.
But I think that's part of our culture. The movies, Hollywood, what we say,
But
I
it's
think
not,
that's part of it.
it's our culture because the government has come in and has taken over as part investor, and that's a whole other nuanced conversation because I work in the entertainment industry, so I'm very aware of the situation. However, to my point, with mass shootings, the question and the prompt, I think having more gun control laws creates more mass shootings. That's what I understood from
if
the
you have
prompt.
easier access to guns, there'd be less mass shootings.
Correct.
Yeah, and are you saying the person wouldn't have went and shot, or that they would be stopped?
Well, regardless, a person would not come in and shoot all these people if people were armed.
So like Uvalde, right? The 376 cops, they did a great job of stopping that shooter, correct?
And it took him 7 minutes, by the way.
Well, cops are not, that's another thing.
But they were trained people with guns, and there was
Right.
376. How did that work?
I just think that the government and the state and the police brutality that exists should not be allowed. And that's why people should, again, own guns and have the right to that freedom and express themselves with it. Because
We're going to get into, we'll have a whole section dedicated to that.
You're saying people should have guns so they can defend themselves against the government and the police. If the people didn't have the guns in the first place, the police wouldn't need them either.
Let's bring in our disagreeers.
When it comes to the actual prompt, about 4 to 6% of mass shootings are carried out by people with a mental illness. And I appreciate the nuances being discussed here because it's important. Mental health is a very easy scapegoat, and it's very easy to point to when there are events that people just can't wrap their mind around. So the point is that it is, yes, a little of a mental health issue, but there are broader, more social concerns. I like that you brought up parenting. There's a shitty parent problem in this country. Let's just be frank. There is, and that's the real epidemic. And then lastly, it's a structural problem. The structure creates gun-free zones. As I started to mention earlier, over 90% of mass shootings are carried out in gun-free zones. The structure does not provide resources or early intervention techniques for people who are there on the ground. I think putting more mental health officers and just counselors in general in schools would do a lot more than putting more cops in schools. Less than 2% of homicides are mass shootings in this country. So I appreciate that we're talking about this, but I feel like it often gets very overblown when we're discussing gun violence and its approaches because it is a bit of an anomaly. And I know that it often
Do you think
gets...
it's unique to the United States?
No, I was going to go there next, actually. Out of the, I think, 97 developed countries they've studied that have had mass shootings,
The US accounted for 73% of mass shootings that occurred in developed countries between 1998 and 2019. According to a 2022 study according to Professor... so yeah, I'm sorry. I bet I was just thinking to be any more than that, and it wasn't.
we're 64th on the list. We're also number 64 when it comes to
64th,
homicides per
yeah.
100,000 people.
Well, I mean, I think just this last year we had more mass shootings in America than calendar days.
No.
So I mean, it was more mass shootings in
But
America
you can't just look at
this
numbers.
last year
You have
than
more
calendar
people
days.
in America than in most countries. We have a homicide rate of about like 1.5%, I think. We have a mass shooting rate of a little under 1.15%. We are 4.
The homicide rate rose to 5.8 per 1,000 people in 2018, to 7.8 in 2021, and then fell to 7.5 in 2022.
0.6% of the world's population. So when you look at those statistics, no, it's not that we are more likely to have it here. I think we are a larger country by far. And I think the other thing that makes us lean more into violence in general is that we are living in a very diverse population. When you look at countries that have lower rates of violence, they're more homogenous. It's difficult for people to get along. They often have not been given the techniques. You have many cultures that are often clashing. I think a lot of our violence issues actually traces back to that.
Rambo.
I don't understand, man. I don't see what world they live in. You know what I mean? Like, you can't change it. There's good people and there's bad people. I don't care what tests you want to do. I don't care what you want to do. Everybody's not going to hold hands and kumbaya. And somebody's going to want what you got. Somebody's going to want what you got. Somebody might want what that baby has. And I want to protect my family. Oh, they need to do this. They need to do that. It's like a yin and a yang. There's going to be bad. No matter what you do, I don't care if you get rid of every gun, every knife. Somebody might rob you. They might come in gangs and beat you to death. You cannot get rid of it. What world are y'all in?
But you agreed earlier. You said that obviously if there were...
The way he's talking, it sounds like everyone just might not bother trying to do anything. like leave shit as leave shit as it is, and if it gets worse, it gets worse. That's what I mean. I know it's not what he says, but it's very close to what it sounds like.
Like a lot less guns taken off the street. That those things would drop, correct?
Well,
Not to say it's going to go away, but it would drop.
Let's think about this. How many
Like
guns?
Australia
Let's
had
be
a
real.
drop,
How
all
many
these
guns there are
different
on the
countries had a
streets?
Huh? There's 372 million. Something like that.
372 million. Are there 372 million murders? All
No,
right then. So
but
why would they do it?
I agree. I agree. With
real.
drinking and driving, there's 300.
Still, because there's still murders happening. Just because the level of murder does not match the level of firearms that are on the country doesn't mean you just shouldn't bother about it.
Cases, 300,000 cases a year, and there's only a couple thousand cases of people crashing. So you also agree that we should be able to drink and drive?
No.
Why?
Because
Why
you can drink to a certain limit, can't you?
But if,
can't you drink to a certain limit when you're driving? They blow a test. You can drink to a certain limit, right? So you can't get drunk.
No, you can.
No, you can drink.
You can still get a DUI under the limit.
So what's the sense of even blowing then?
Because if you are clearly impaired, and so here's the thing: is like if I go, but I'm the best driver, trust me. And this is the problem with having a debate like this with people who are very good with their guns. I'm okay with you guys having your guns because clearly you've demonstrated 100 different ways that you know how to use it. But at the very least, let's take those steps to say, if you're a gun owner, prove that you know how to use it. Prove the same way we have to do with a car. It could just be an interview, it could be anything. There's a lot of people when you ask, like, oh, why would you want a gun? They're not good at lying. They're very obviously disturbed, and those things would reduce significantly a lot of these things that happen.
Have you ever purchased a gun before?
I have tons of guns.
So you know
I have
you
a
have to
Golden
do
Henry 22, I have an AR.
So you have to do a background check, correct?
No. So first off, most states don't even have that. 44 states don't even make
What
you
state?
register it.
I never saw a state
And on
that
top
don't
of
have
that,
a
when I
background
bought
check.
my gun, I remember I was 18. There was a little quiz we had to take. Listen, this is a quiz we had to take. And the guy leaned over because, very simply, in his mind, making a gun sale is more important than safety. He leans over and goes, A, B. I mean, I knew there were very basic questions, but it was simply, where do you point a gun? Where's the safest place? And my friend who was with me, who wasn't very smart, we were kids, literally was getting them wrong, and he goes, it's B. And I'm sitting there thinking now, older, going, they don't care. These people are not well trained.
Every state is different.
Exactly. California is one of the strictest, and still I walked in and bought a gun at 18 years old knowing nothing about it. My friend who couldn't even pass the test was able to get a gun. That should show you, and this is the problem with like having different areas, Chicago, when people bring this up in the shootings. Yeah, it's because Indiana is literally 2.5 minutes away and you can walk in and get a gun. Yeah. There's no border checks between states, so it's a very complex issue.
I want to ask a follow-up just to the whole group. Raise your hand if you think mass shootings are a uniquely American issue.
Yep.
And for the people who raised their hand, do you avoid mass gatherings because of concerns?
I have before. There was like a free concert that was going on in my city, and when I saw all of the people and the lack of security, I was like, I need to go home, because it was on the beach, right? And there's not that many metal detectors or anything like that. I'm like, it would be really easy for someone to just bring a gun in here, and I don't want to be a part of it.
Anybody else have an opinion? You avoid mass gatherings?
I am originally from Denver, Colorado.
Sorry.
I was in kindergarten when Columbine happened, so I, grew up in schools, I'm sure the same way with you, doing the active shooter drills. So that was something that was always on, or that we knew about from the time I was a child. But then there was also the shooting at the movie theater.
Arvada,
And Arvada, I was at a midnight premiere that night. Luckily, I was not at that one. But I remember coming out and seeing police around because they went to movie theaters in surrounding area just in case something was being planned at other theaters. And thank God nothing happened to me. And I feel so passionately about it. And for the people who, they did lose their lives, that is a reality. But that's something I can't you go into a movie theater, you see the exits, and it's something that comes into your mind. That, okay, that's where you go.
But what stops a bad guy with a gun?
Not letting him get a gun.
Not letting him.
If he has one, though.
Okay.
What stops him?
But that's what we're advocating.
You're not going to get rid of every gun, bro.
No
Let's
one's
get
saying
rid of
that.
it.
No one's saying that.
You're not going to get rid of every gun for every bad guy.
UK, Germany, other countries, again.
Get rid of all guns.
Oh, Justice and then Barbie.
Okay, I was just gonna say, considering that, mass shootings are unique to America, in my opinion, I think it also has to do with the media's portrayal of mass shootings that inflict fear into people.
Yeah, I think the media got I agree.
And glorify it.
I agree.
For example, Alex Jones,
I agree.
who's a huge conspiracy theorist, basically put into the stratosphere that what happened at that, Sandy Hook, what happened with all those little kids was
said it was
fake.
staged.
It was
Yeah.
staged. And since America has the, freedom of speech, it then gets people like Alex Jones and other people to continue this miseducation of how
I just don't feel
mass shootings
safe,
occur.
man. We're right now. If somebody just wants to rob us, right? Just anybody, you just don't know. Somebody breaks in here. I can't. We're all dead. Every one of us. I can't
that's the
protect
question.
you.
If you want to get rid of all guns,
That's my faith then. I'm okay
nuke,
with that.
That's not compared to a nuke. That's compared to a car wreck.
so that is the question. If you guys want to get rid of all guns, right, which you just said, quote, that's never going to happen. So now we know that guns exist.
They're there.
But now I don't have the right to carry one. She doesn't have the right to carry one. You don't have the right to carry one. Someone comes into this building right now and points a gun at every single one of us. How are you okay with saying that my right to fire back and protect me and you and you and you, I shouldn't have it? He's allowed to have it because he went and got it illegally, because you just said we can't get rid of all guns. But now I can't get one because I'm not a criminal. Because you can't destroy guns, because a criminal will figure out how to make a new
gun.
kind of
That's
gun.
what I'm saying.
Like
You
there's
can-
gun parts all over the world.
There's
They'll put one
everything
together.
that you can do. There's
so when you
ghost
say,
guns.
But then, and this is where the problem with this conversation is things evolve, right? And guns are going to evolve. And if I have the ability to have, in future, 100 years from now, ability for a pistol to be able to shoot something that is as powerful as a grenade, are you going to be like, that's your right, because if someone can have it, I should too.
It's the Second
or someone
Amendment.
can, and that's the problem. There has to be some restriction, unless you all believe that we should all be able to have nukes at our homes, grenades at our homes, grenade
We
launchers
should
at our
have.
homes.
We should be able to have equal whatever the government has.
Okay,
That's what it
then-
says on the Second Amendment. That's why they put.
So
It's
then
the
you
second thing that
agree
they
we
put
should have
on the
nukes at our
amendment.
homes.
If I
I
can
agree
afford
with
one.
the idea that the whole reason the government gave us a Second Amendment right was to protect ourselves from the
A
government.
terrain
And
government.
so
we're
if
gonna
they are,
we're gonna get into that.
Okay, that's another
Let's go.
crime.
Let's reset.
Yes.